refugees, some Burmese and some Iraqi, but the majority are Bhutanese. We provide social services to pass the reception and placement program. I also have two of my staff here, the job developer, Elizabeth and Danielle. They're all back there. Can you please stand up? Don't be shy. Okay, so now I'm going to make it very quickly because I know we all want to listen to the event today. Can you go back to the first slide? No. Oh, okay, that's just, okay, go to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly about who are the refugees, look at the definition. I'm also going to talk about, Barbara already talked about the local resettlement agencies, and I'm going to talk about the actual resettlement process. And then I'll finish up talking with what local agencies do to help refugee resettlement in their journey to become self-sufficient. As you can see, it's going to be a lot of information, but I'm just going to try as much as I can in a few minutes. What's a refugee? So there is a legal term and definition of a refugee. It's an international law, and it was adopted, as you can see, by the UN Refugee Convention in 1951, and that's the same definition that was adopted by the U.S. government for its resettlement process. Now, as far as refugees' status, there are, besides the refugee resettlement program we're going to talk about, there are other solutions that are being advocated by UNHCR and other refugee protection advocates. One is voluntary repatriation, which means that the refugee finds out that they can go back to their country and they will be safe. That means the reason why they flee their country are no longer there. They feel safe and they go back to their country. The second option is local integration, which means that the refugee will be accepted in their country of asylum, either as citizen or they will be given a status that will allow them to work and live a normal life instead of living just in a refugee camp where they are not allowed to work. So local integration means that they will be allowed to work and live just like any other citizen in that country. Then I'm going to talk about the resettlement process, which is only 1% of the refugees have the chance to get a resettlement process, either in the U.S. or in other countries. And according to UNHCR, we're talking about more than 11 million refugees right now. So only 1% have the chance to come to the U.S. or other countries. So Barbara already mentioned the refugee resettlement agencies in Pittsburgh, so I'm not going to go over that again, so that will save us some time. So now, the resettlement process itself, if you can go back to the previous one. Yes, thank you. So the refugees are referred either by the UNHCR or other NGOs to the US government for refugee processing. And the refugees have to meet that definition that we talked about, and UNHCR give them that status. So it's a legal status, but as we can see, that by itself, the refugee status as defined by the UNHCR does not guarantee someone refugee resettlement in America. The US resettlement program has its own criteria in addition to the refugee status. So one has to meet that status, then the US has its own criteria. So that's very important to understand. For example, in the last few years when we resettled Burundians, one of the criteria was they have to be Burundians from 1972 conflict. So if someone was there after 1980, 1990s conflict that happened in Burundi, they were not eligible, even if they were in the same refugee camp as the refugees from 1972. So one has to meet both criteria from the US and the refugee refugee status. Now, as far as the referral, there are priorities. There's P1, P2, P3. Again, that's going to be a lot of information.
Here, could you talk for a minute? I think what we want you to tell them is what happens when they get to Pittsburgh, how much funding they get, and how much support they get, and when they have to get a job. Could you quickly go over that in 5 minutes? Because that's what people here need to know.
Okay, so I don't need to go over. I should have been told that then. I was asked to talk about resettlement process. Okay, that's fine.
That's what I meant, resettlement.
Yes. Okay, that's okay. I can do that. Then you can go to the next one. Okay, right there. That will take 5 minutes. So when the refugee arrived here, there was an initial reception and placement program, which is funded through PRM, Bureau of Population and Refugee Migration, through the State Department. And that's where we go to the airport, we welcome the refugees, then they meet their case managers, they do their intake, and you can see the whole list, but there are a lot of details that are not mentioned there, what the intake means, what the orientation means. Then also after that, after the 3-month period, within the 3-month period, we focus on employment and help the clients become self-sufficient. That's the goal of the refugee resettlement offices here in Pittsburgh, is to help the clients become self-sufficient. And as you can see, the housing portion there, we do help them financially for the first 3 months to pay their utilities, their rent, and we also help them with transportation. So beside those 3 to 6 months, we also have services beyond that to help that self-sufficiency to sustain it. So up to 5 years, anybody who's a refugee is eligible for social services, employment, and case management for the 5 years after they arrive. Right? Thank you.
The rest of our agenda this morning is that we're going to have a panel discussion led by Benedict Halang. He's president of the Union of African Communities in Pittsburgh, and he also works at JFCS. He himself was a refugee from Sudan who's been here about 25 years? 10 years, sorry. I'm making him older than he is. He'll give a quick sketch of the region to show it to you, and then he will run the panel. And we've prepared questions that Benedict will ask and moderate for the panel. And I just want to let everyone know that the panelists would have much more than they could say about each question that's asked, and as well as some of the Congolese who are here. But due to the size and what we want to cover, their answers will be brief. That's why we've built in a time afterwards for networking and seeing what resources are here and talking to people. And we hope that you'll make connections with each other. After he asks them the questions, we'll have some Q&A from the audience, and then we're going to introduce the resource organizations that are here and begin networking time. And we're pleased that along with the Congolese organizations and the refugee resettlement organizations and other organizations that work with them, like this Rojo Health Center, we have representatives that came to learn who are from the health department, courts, hospitals, primary care, health insurance, the FBI, literacy organizations, people from school districts in the AIU, crisis intervention and counseling, behavioral health, family support, early childhood, and as I said, the refugee resettlement. We hope to have fruitful connections made and more planning and collaboration underway in the next weeks and months. Before I hand the microphone over to Benedict, I'd also like to acknowledge Rosa Maria Ponciano, who is standing in the back, and she is an intern with us. She's a GISPIA student, and she does extraordinary work. I'm very proud of her, and she is responsible for putting together this program today. Okay, Benedict would like me to introduce the panel. Okay, the first person I have next to me is Arletta Mbanga. She works for SEED, which is the Christian Evangelical Economic Development Organization, and she will tell you about them. We're in Pittsburgh as part of her remarks when she's asked questions, and she also will tell you about her experience coming to Pittsburgh as a Congolese refugee, in answering some of the questions that are asked. We have Pappy Magwira, and Pappy is a chairperson of the African Christian United Fellowship. We have Biju Lendo. Biju is the president of the Congolese Union of Pittsburgh. We have Becky Czech, and Becky works with an organization called Congo Stories. She's also a fourth generation family from the Congo, and going back to her great-grandfather, he was a medical. Her family were building and medical missionary families, and she's done a lot of work with medical mission work in Congo herself. And Eli Kahonia, and he is president of Africa Yetu, which is a wonderful cultural organization in Pittsburgh, and he is also Congolese.